Welcome to Impact Farming, where we introduce you to the people and ideas that will have a massive impact on your farming operation. Brought to you by Farm Marketer. Sit down, start the engine, and let's roll with today's show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Impact Farming Show. Today, I have an amazing and returning guest, Gerry Friesen. Welcome back.
Thanks, Tracy. It's a pleasure to be here.
I am so happy to have you back on the show, just like always. How are you?
Well, I'm doing well. When I see myself in the video, I kind of go, ooh, you know what? My pandemic hair is kind of, taking me back to the 80s, but...
You're looking good. I was thinking about that today. I'm like, I better just pretty this up a little bit. I'm not in isolation anymore, so...
Yeah, exactly.
This is actually my first ever Zoom interview for the Impact Farming Show. So
wow.
It's something neat. So thank you for joining us. I'm excited to have you with Gerry and I sharing in his wisdom. Today we are going to speak about something that is very near and dear to our hearts, very relevant right now. We are in April, just the end of April, 2020, in the COVID-19 pandemic. Unbelievable, Gerry. I mean, to me, I am floored, and I don't know if you feel like me and probably everybody else, just a little bit speechless. You don't even know quite what to say, right?
Well, yeah, and and for myself, Tracy, this actually started, I believe this week, Friday, will be 7 weeks that I've basically isolated myself. Okay. I have a compromised respiratory condition, so I have to be particularly cautious. And so I've been doing a lot of work from home. And, when this first started 7 weeks ago, I told my wife, I said, boy, you know what? I'm going to binge watch Netflix and, lay on the couch. And, well, that hasn't happened. But what I really see changing so much is a change in attitudes, right? At first when this started, it felt really surreal and you weren't sure what was true and what wasn't, but everybody was working together. And then, in fact, I remembered clearly a few weeks ago, actually my wife's cousin's husband ended up in ICU with COVID, and suddenly
really?
it hits home.
Oh, wow.
And now you go, well, it's even more real, right? And so,
yeah.
So it leaves us with uncomfortable feelings.
It is. I must say, as a person, I am very grateful. I would say naturally, of course, I could be more grateful, but I do appreciate what I have. But I am floored and speechless how much I have taken my liberty and freedoms for granted. I'm just speechless. From somebody that travels a lot for work and just gets in my vehicle and goes and does what I want. I knew we're first world country. We're pretty free, but wow.
Oh, I hear you. And it was amazing. This morning, actually, I took my wife to work early in the morning, and I got home and it was just like, wow, I was outside. I was driving. It felt good, right? Just to get back to some normalcy here.
Yeah, it's taken me, and the strangest part is, I guess, you see how you react in situations. And I must say, I'm grateful, and I would say I can go with the flow and adapt to change. I would say that's a badge of honor. But my heels have been a little, it's just been something I've never experienced before. And it has probably taken me, I would say, the better part of 5 to 6 weeks to fully get back into my groove again, because it's changed a lot for my business, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And Tracy, you're talking about something that so many people feel. You talked about gratitude. My wife and I just talked about this the other day is, for us, we haven't felt a financial hit. She still is able to go to work. I've been busier than I have been for a while. Yeah, doing things remotely, which I hate because I like meeting face to face with people. But in spite of that, each morning, and and your audience, if they've watched other interviews we've done, know that I'm predisposed to anxiety. Mm-hmm. So what I find is each morning over the last 7 weeks, my anxiety level is always going up a little bit more each morning, right? And
Yeah.
and I try and pinpoint what it's about, but really all it's about is the fact that we're living in this unknown world right now. And when are we going to be set free? I shared with you just before we started that the golf course is opening Monday. So that's just a little bit of a ray of sunshine for me, you know? And so these are those things that we try and get used to.
Well, and I think I've been chatting exactly like you've just said. I kind of feel that way. And on Egg Twitter, you kind of listen in and watch on the feed. And I think it's just a general feeling of unsettledness, right?
It is. And then also what does it for me, Tracy, and you know, I used to be a farmer, and I used to be a hog producer. And so when I go on social media, and I have to tell you, you know this, I don't like social media. If you watch Corner Gas, every time they say Wolverton, they spit. That's what I feel like doing when I talk about social media.
I know you feel
but every time I go on social media, there's another heart-wrenching story about some agricultural commodity out there. And quite honestly, just while I was waiting for you, I went on Twitter and I saw a picture where a hog producer somewhere, I believe in the States, had euthanized market pigs. And it just looked horrendous. And yet this is the reality of it. And you hear about hog producers here who are giving weanlings away and they're aborting pigs. And in BC, I just read about a chicken processing plant that is closed. And we know that cattle processing facilities in Alberta and I believe in Ontario as well have closed. This is creating an unbelievable hardship because on the one side, we have the human factor, of course, with us all dealing with mental health stuff. And when stuff like this happens, it gets worse. But now it's taken another big step. And so it's devastating out there.
Well, I mean, you led us right into where we want to go. I brought you on the show. I brought Gerry on the show today to chat about mental health. And he wrote a recent article that we're going to share in the show notes on Farm Marketer. And it was called A Tale of Two Brains. And I thought the article, was brilliant, and I'm sharing it for that reason. And I want to bring Gerry on because right now, I think there's so many of us that could use a little reminder. I often find, and we've chatted about this before too, if you can tune into a podcast and listen to people talk about mental health, there's something in hearing other people naming what you're going through. And I think if you name it and you can talk about it, it just takes a weight off your shoulders. And we've chatted about that a few times. So I brought Gerry on for you so that you can listen in, and he's going to share with us a tale of two brains, and I'm very excited. So we've chatted a little bit about what's going on. Not only are we dealing with COVID and immigration issues, you've named a whole bunch of them. We have children that are home from school when parents are probably supposed to be out in the field doing seeding. So, I mean, a perfect storm.
Yes.
I think we've almost talked about a perfect storm in the past in terms of a few little market fluctuations. This is bringing it to a whole new level. Agree?
Absolutely it is. And I think generally speaking, Tracy, when we talk about mental health, I compared it the other day to we've heard a lot about the financial issues all Canadians are facing. And you hear about, in fact, I heard a statistic, I think it was 40% of Canadians wouldn't be able to fulfill their financial obligations if they missed one paycheck. And I like to correlate that to our mental health because, and we've heard in agriculture, I spoke about it lots this winter in my presentations, is how farmers are feeling a lot more anxiety. And I think a lot of us with our mental health, we live from week to week, from day to day. And suddenly, if there's an event like COVID, it pushes a lot of us over the edge. And suddenly we're grasping or trying to figure out how to deal with these strange emotions that we're feeling and the strange stuff going on. And so that's where I get into this two brain thing.
Okay, so I know you wanted to chat about changing environment, worry. We kind of touched on that. Before we jump into the two brains and get you to share about that, is there anything else you wanted to touch on about what happens to our brain?
Well, I think first and foremost, Tracy, what I see a lot more out there is anxiety, and I talked about mine going up on a daily basis for no other reason than we're living in a abnormal world, right? And I talked to, and it was so strange, and I love using this example. I had a young client in my office a few years ago, actually, and he was dealing with some mental health issues. And I asked him to describe anxiety to me, and I said, if anxiety was a person or a thing, what would you liken it to? And without hesitation, it kind of blew me away because it's almost like he had been thinking about this. He said, a squirrel. And I went, tell me more about that, right? And then he started talking about what squirrels do, right? And we can all envision a squirrel. In fact, I was watching one out my window here earlier this morning, and they flip from place to place, and they're never standing still, and they never run in a straight line, and they go up one tree and they disappear, but they're hopping to another one, and they're noisy. In fact, I sometimes wonder if they sleep. But he said that's what his anxiety was like, and I went, wow. You know what? I can so totally relate.
Yeah.
And then what happens is when we experience this anxiety, and again, my wife and I talk about this quite frequently, is you know, dinner rolls around at 5 or 6 o'clock, whatever the time is, and we just look at each other and go, why are we so tired?
Yeah.
You know, we're not doing nearly as much as we did previous to COVID. But we're just weary, and that's actually what anxiety does, because our brains are working overtime, and there's that squirrel and they're running around. In fact, it's kind of funny, we talked about golf, and I've told you this story, is when at night, when I wake up and I'm feeling anxious, I like going to my happy place, and my happy place is a golf course. Nice. And so ever since I heard about this example about a squirrel, I'll tee off on the first hole in my imagination, and I'm walking down the fairway and I go, oh, there's a squirrel, and boom, my golf game is over, right? And then my thoughts start going all over the place again. But it's these thoughts that are running rampant in our brains, and the big unknown. I mean, if we knew that come July 1st, we'd be back to normal, we wouldn't be feeling the anxiety we do. But we don't know, because we hear this and we hear that, and then we hear about a second wave. And so it's this big unknown that just creates this anxiety in us.
I agree. You know, we felt the same way too. And generally, we're business owners times two, right? We have the farm, I have farm marketer, and not to discount anybody's worries that are employed, because we all worry. But I think the more thoughts, the more worries, the more concerns on your brain, your batteries drain really quick. And I've noticed that too. At different times, sometimes you don't even realize what you're all going through and working on. And then you go, why am I so tired? And now, exactly that, because I think we're just thinking and thinking and thinking, because there's no end point, and it just drains those batteries really quick. Like watching a video on your iPhone, we're in video mode. It just drains it really quick. Where if we were just in like still mode, status quo, we have our normal level of energy, right?
Yeah, and you mentioned the word worry, Tracy, and I think that's key to when you talk about our batteries draining, is worrying is letting your mind create something you don't want to have happen.
Right.
So in other words, we're thinking about all kinds of things that aren't real, which again is drawing power that is kind of useless if we can get away from that worrying piece.
I think we might have shared, I got to go to a quote, Gerry. I think we might have shared this one together.
I knew you would.
You know, okay, so I've known a lot of troubles. Most of them have not come true. Mark.
Yes.
And that one, and yes, we have spoke about this before. And that one is so true, right? Because I think our brain's always trying to find an answer and certainty, spin those wheels, and we worry. And of course, thankfully, most of what we worry about never comes true, right? But it just drains our energy and our life force. So I'm glad that you touched on that. And again, I have changed my life completely. And I'm sure we have discussed this as well, but it was in a podcast early on in my entrepreneur career where I all of a sudden popped it on, and then they started talking about worry and all of these things. And I go, oh, I'm not the only one. So I just love this chat, because I think people need to know we're all going through this together. Humans are all relatively the same. I mean, we have mental health issues, but we have our scale of mental health. And I think right now, like you said, everybody is maxing out on that stressed out scale.
Yes, and I think, and I was going to talk about this a little bit later, but I'll bring it up because it fits well here, is a lot of people are also beating themselves up for the lot of thoughts they have, because they're going, well, I've got stuff to be grateful for, and I shouldn't be worried about this. And my least favorite one, or most favorite, whichever way you want to look at it, is, well, you know what? My neighbor next door or my cousin in ICU has it much worse than I do, so I shouldn't even think. Well, don't do that. It's okay to feel the way we are, but let's recognize what it really is.
Excellent. Let's come back to that. Let's jump into the two brains right now. And I want you to really break that down for our audience out there.
Okay, so I guess, Tracy, and the brain is quite complicated, and I like to simplify things for my own life. And so I thought about that earlier this winter. You know, we have a frontal lobe and a temporal lobe, and there's an amygdala in there, and there's a cortex, I believe, and all kinds of other stuff just in this little skull we have, right? And I simplified it down to saying, you know what? Let's just picture us having two brains. And I go, we have a thinking brain and a feeling brain. And to break that down a little more, a thinking brain it's slower, it's accurate, it calculates, it's methodical, wants to think things through and come out with a good resolution. Whereas the feeling brain is much more, you know, in fact, I sometimes call it a drama queen, right?
Really? Absolutely. Yeah.
It's inaccurate. Oftentimes it's irrational. We talked about anxiety and the squirrel, and you know, very often it's inaccurate, it's impulsive. But what happens is most times in our life, particularly when we have this anxiety in us, that feeling brain jumps up, because the thinking brain is sitting there going, well, okay, I can figure this out, and yeah, you know what, I'm grateful, and so this is all going to work out. Because whereas the feeling brain is already way ahead of you, like that squirrel, right, on a breakaway, and so it jumps to the forefront and controls our emotions a lot more. And the example I use, Tracy, is just this last fall. In fact, I phoned to cancel one of the services that I have, and it shall remain nameless just in case they're one of your sponsors. But the bottom line is, I called, right? And I can already, when I phone a large organization or large business, and you have to press 1 for English, and then you have to listen through all the options, and then you press 3 because that's what you want to do, but then you press the wrong one, and then you have to start over. By the time I actually have a human voice on the other end, my feeling brain is already totally in control.
Yeah.
And I am just ready to explode. And so what happened actually is, when I did finally start talking to someone, they weren't listening to me. They weren't listening to what I really wanted. And I probably wasn't making myself very clear, because I was already in a hyper state emotionally. But finally, in fact, that person hung up on me. And so my wife came home and she says, well, did you cancel whatever I was canceling? And I just kind of almost blew up. And I said, well, I tried, but they wouldn't listen to me. And she uses her thinking brain way more than I use mine. And so she just calmly sat down in her chair and made a phone call. And I was kind of sitting here listening. And you know what? Within 5 minutes, she hung up and said, yeah, it's done. You know, so that feeling brain can very often get us into a lot of trouble. And so we have to try and subdue that. But here, this is where the irony is what it does is it starts taking control. And I often find that my feeling brain probably kicks in proportionately to what my anxiety levels are. And so the more my anxiety goes up, the more we worry, the more I'm not really thinking about what's reality, the more I'm bound to just do irrational, have irrational thoughts or even do irrational things.
Absolutely. I think you have a few points on, and solid points on what anxiety does to our thinking. Did you want to dive into those a little bit more?
Yeah, and what I found, and again, if we go back to this COVID thing, and at the outset, where governments jumped in, where communities were jumping in, and everybody was working together to try and work our way through this. And suddenly over the last week or two, I've seen a total shift in attitude, again, in the news and on social media, whatever the case may be, where suddenly we're looking for someone to blame for things, right? And globally, it's okay. We have to blame the Chinese government, or provincially, you have politicians trying to blame someone else, and you bring it down further. And I want to blame someone else because I can't be out there we have this innate desire to blame others when things aren't working out for us. And so again, that's something that's really prevalent with people that are experiencing some mental health issues. And I'm really, I've gotten to the point in life where I recognize this with myself, that when I get up in the mornings and I'm feeling a little anxious about what's going to happen that day, or if I have a mediation that I'm concerned about how it's going to happen, or there's other stuff happening, my anxiety levels go up, and suddenly I'm much more irritable, I'm frustrated, and I start lashing out at people, and people close to me, obviously my family, my wife. But what very often happens is at the end of my expectations for others go up so much, and I find myself just going, whoa, hang on. I withdraw from it and realize that other people around me aren't any different than they were yesterday or last week or whenever, but in fact, it's myself that's conjuring up all this stuff. And again, that feeling brain, right? Coming out and thinking irrationally, and I'm blaming others because I'm as frustrated and as irritated as I am.
Oh, isn't that human nature?
And in fact, we talked about favorite books, right? That book I referred to previously, Feeling Good by Dr. David Burns, he mentions in there that we catastrophize everything. And that's almost a tongue twister. But what it does is when we experience these anxieties, what happens is that, in fact, we find ourselves musing about our own shortcomings, but we also focus very much on other people's imperfections.
Ooh.
And so we have to work our way through that to get over some of that.
That is gold right there. Not that I do any of that, Gerry. Never.
No, I didn't think you would. I was talking about myself.
Everybody else, right? And our audience, they don't relate either.
Right.
Did you see my sarcastic look? It's hard, and I'm aware of some of these things, and I try to be emotionally intelligent, but the brain, the emotional brain, like you said, is so powerful, and you get wrapped up in your story, and you're right. You just got to stop and go, is this true? Right?
Yeah. And then the other thing that happens is, so we get over the fact that it wasn't someone else that was at fault here, but in fact, it might be myself. So now I'm blaming myself, right? Well, that doesn't do me any good either, because when I blame myself, my self-esteem goes down. I feel down about myself. Amen. And so suddenly I isolate, not because of COVID, but because of the way I'm feeling about myself.
Yeah.
Right. And another book that I like, and the title of the book is The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Bleep.
I read that one.
By Mark Manson. And he actually talks in that book about the feedback loop from hell. And
Right.
And that really piqued my curiosity when I read that, because what happens is if I start beating up on myself, but I've decided I didn't want to do that anymore, but then I do it again, and then I kick myself for doing it again, and then I think I'm such a loser because I'm such an idiot, and that cycle just carries on, right? And we start feeling guilty about feeling guilty, and we feel bad about treating others like it. That cycle just carries on.
Well, and so many people, I mean, there's a million, zillion different situations we can all relate, but especially in COVID, the markets have dropped right out. Farmers could be sitting at home going, oh my gosh, why didn't I lock in? Why didn't I buy calf insurance? Why didn't I get my grain sold? And then same thing. Then you go, oh my gosh, I went through this last spring. Why didn't I do it? And then we just become our own worst enemy, right?
Exactly.
Can't blame somebody else because we didn't do it. Then we blame ourselves, rightfully so. But after a certain point, you got to learn the lesson and move on, right? Or else it's baggage.
Exactly. And that's where I like to start talking about particularly self-talk. How we talk to ourselves, and that infamous quote, if you talk to others the way you talk to yourself, would you have any friends, right? I think that's an awesome quote, because we need to think about that, because quite frankly, if I ever talk to...
I'm just having a good laugh about that one. Isn't it true, right?
But it's totally true, absolutely. Yeah. Because we call ourselves an idiot, or you know what, I was such a fool for doing that, or I was such a loser for doing that. And so we have much more compassion for other people than we do for ourselves. Absolutely. And we have to be able to do a paradigm shift there and turn that around.
You know, whether it's children or spouses or staff, if they made a mistake, that's okay. You know what? We learned this lesson. Let's just do better next time, right?
Exactly.
But myself, I'm pretty hard on myself, right?
Exactly.
I wouldn't be near as nice to myself as I would to others. And I like to think I'm an ounce or two emotionally intelligent, but it's a bit of human nature until you catch yourself and learn.
Exactly. And so we have to use self-compassion, Tracy. And very often I don't use self-compassion, I use self-pity, right? I feel sorry for myself. Okay. But self-compassion compassion is, when you have compassion, you have empathy for others and really a desire to help others. Okay. So if you turn that around and do that to yourself and say, you know what, I have empathy for what I'm going through and I want to help myself, you start feeling better about yourself, and it's not nearly as difficult to get over some of these humps we have to get over.
You know, just saying that, I felt the load lighten a little bit, right? Whatever we're all going through, we're going to have our story about how we got here, what we could have done better, even if we do a good job, but I should have done. Deep breath, Tracy. You're only human. You can only do so much.
Exactly. And we're all humans. We're all going to screw up. We're all going to make mistakes. That's just part of life.
Yeah.
Be kind to yourself.
I love it. Because
we're all worthy of kindness.
Oh, those are golden words right there. And everybody out at home too, heed that. Heed those words, because I'm sure we're all out there going, why didn't I? What could I do? You know what? We're going through something nobody has ever gone through before.
Exactly.
Be passionate, be kind, be a friend on your own team, right?
Exactly.
That's nice. I feel good. When you said that, it just, deep breath, right?
Well, yeah, and sometimes we have to just sit back and actually reflect on what we've just thought, or just reflect on what was just said, right? Because we're in such a hurry to get through life, we don't take the time to sit back and go, okay, hang on a minute. I need to shift the way I think.
Yeah. I always joke that I love the mind and I love psychology, because to me, your life builds your life experience. Yeah. And the better you are at being on top of your mind, the better your life will be. And that's why I'm always studying. But I joke, it's a full-time job managing this thing.
Absolutely.
Right?
I wouldn't wish my brain on anybody.
Well, who knows what goes through here too. But same thing, you try and be emotionally intelligent, and you're thinking and trying to learn and improve. And I think it's a lifelong journey. But these words you're sharing, yes. I have a feeling that everybody watching out there is going, okay, deep breath. I didn't create the situation. I can't control a lot of it. What's come out of it is not my fault. And I'm going to be kind to myself, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
I love it. So I want to just review those really quick. So the effects of stress and anxiety on our thinking is blaming others, blaming ourselves, and then we need to self-compassion, you mentioned. And then also self-talk. How are we talking to ourselves?
Exactly.
Okay.
And again, just, you know, and that whole blaming thing, and of course, I see that a lot in the conflict management work I do, where when people aren't getting along, you know, they have a tendency to say, well, if that person would change that, then everything would be good, right? But really all that does is blame just pushes the responsibility to fix something on the other party. And so instead of doing that, you know what? You have to work together on something. And if it's inside of yourself, work on yourself.
That's awesome. I one time heard 2 points. You can never change somebody else because you can't. They have to be ready and willing and aware to change themselves. But if you want ultimate control over your life, you got to take ultimate responsibility. Yeah. Yeah. And when I heard that concept, that changed my life, because I would, if I have nothing else, I would say I took responsibility. I'd own it. But there's parts in different relationships you go, well, if they were different. Wait a minute, why don't I take responsibility? If this relationship isn't as strong as it needs to be, chances are I'm playing an equal part in it. So what did I do? I'm going to own it, change myself, and like you said earlier, then people change down the line, right?
Yep, exactly, for sure.
Okay, I love that. Good points there. So now we have covered the awareness. Where we're at, what we're likely thinking, what we're likely doing. I'm an action kind of gal, and I know you have some points with us on how to manage during these unprecedented times.
Well, and first and foremost, and through the ages of stress management, we've heard about taking an inventory, right? What can you control? What can't you control? In this day and age we're in now, the things we can control are actually quite overwhelming. And for me to sit here and suggest, well, just put those aside, is way easier said than done. Yeah. But again, if we can go back to our brain and we can control our feeling brain to just settle down for a while and use our thinking brain, because the thinking brain is really good at taking the things we can control and working on those. And when I've often said, if we take the things we can control and put them on a shelf, our list of what stresses us out is much shorter. And again, this time we're in right now, it's difficult to do that. But try and put your feeling brain to rest for a little bit. Use your thinking brain. Work on the things you can control, because that's really all we can do. And yeah. At some point it will work out, and at this point what we have to do is we just have to kind of break this down into smaller steps and basically live one day at a time. Because if we start thinking about tomorrow or next month, a week or next month or next year or the second wave or what, wow, just saying that kind of makes me feel overwhelmed.
Yeah, you're right.
And I'd like to scream, right? Because no, I can't do this for another month or 2 or 6. And then you go, no, take a deep breath, because all you're doing is right now, what you're doing right now, I'm dealing with this today as best possible.
I love it. I love it. Okay. So what is in our control? You reviewed that. Decision making. I know you had you had some other great points.
Well, the one in particular, and again, and you actually alluded to this a little bit earlier, Tracy, and I talked this winter a lot to farmers about decision making and how stress affects our decision making. And we talk about, well, you know what, last spring I did this and it didn't work, and so this spring I have to do things differently. And decision making, logically making decisions, is hampered when our stress levels go up too high.
Oh,
and we have to be very much aware of that. And so again, it's the thinking brain and feeling brain, right? When we're feeling anxious and we have to make decisions and we feel unsure of ourselves, that feeling brain again takes over, and it thinks back to, oh, 5 years ago I did this and it really worked well, and so I'm going to do that again. And what we tend to do is ignore pertinent information to make decisions, because that information might give us negative vibes. And you know, I read something earlier this morning about how traditionally, and year in and year out, farmers invest huge amounts of money in producing food based on a perceived market, right? And so, yeah, right now it looks like they're going to need canola in fall, so I'm going to plant a lot of canola. Or you know what, the futures for hogs or for cattle are going up, so I'm going to expand my herd. We make decisions based on pertinent information. Now, the information we're living in today, or what we know today, is that there's breaks in the food chain, right? And so what am I going to grow? What am I going to do? And so then it's up to us to try and not get anxious about it, get our feeling brain in control again, use our thinking brain to think this through and read the pertinent information and reach out and ask for help.
Smart.
Because there are people out there with business experts, and again, and it's a point I'm getting to about verbalizing our thoughts, but there's people out there that can help you make these decisions. Because when you start talking to others about it, you know what, it starts making sense, and other people can tell you whether you're on the right track or not. And the one quote I've got here, which I think is important, is that research has shown that rational, emotionally stable, and conscientious farmers are more likely to have a profitable business.
Amen.
And so how can we be emotionally stable and conscientious when our feeling brain is running rampant, right? When the squirrel in our brain is running rampant, we can't. So there again, we have to try as best possible to use our thinking brain.
I like that. I want to just jump back to a point that you just said, and I'm going to go to the male-female dynamic here. And being a female, I didn't quite realize how much, and I think it's a female thing and maybe a personality thing. I don't necessarily need to talk about my feelings a lot, right? It's not something that I do a lot. I'm pretty go, go, go. But I did not realize how much value I get in speaking something out loud. I don't even need the other person to say anything. Probably better if they don't. There is just something that comes, and I don't know if it's a female, male thing, or a human thing, but I just need to verbalize what I'm thinking. And then as I'm talking it through, the ideas click together. And I joke often on Saturdays, that's when I have my best ideas. I'm rested up. Anthony and I have a bit more time to chat. And he knows now, like, I just need a kind of riff, so to speak. And then at the end I go, thanks, Anthony. And then carry on. And then I just have a clarity where it was kind of bouncing around. And I think he's very different in that manner, where he'll process it all. He's a very logical thinker. He processes it all upstairs, and then he only says it when he's at the end. Me, I'm 75% there, need to verbalize it, say it, and then I'm done. Anyways, I don't know if
you're absolutely right, Tracy. And there's an age-old saying that says, "Women talk about it, men kill themselves." And I know that's a very I don't know, harsh statement to make, but when we get into the field of mental illness, that is the truth out there. And that's one of my big points I make time in and time out is we need to talk. And what happens so often, and very much along the lines of what you just said, where you're processing new ideas and talking about them, I would suspect that very often when you verbalize these ideas, sometimes when they actually come out of your mouth, you go, oh, that was a crappy idea, right?
Absolutely.
Hey, that's really awesome. And that's what we do again with our anxieties and our worrying. If we leave them inside our brain, they just stay there, and that's what we stew on.
Yes.
But and that's why it's so important to talk. But what also happens, and again, very often you don't necessarily need someone to answer you back, but when you talk and you actually hear yourself saying what's going on in your brain, very often you're going to go, oh, well, that makes no sense.
Yeah.
Oh, why am I worried about that? In fact, it happened a couple of mornings ago. My son and his wife and kids are living in our basement. And so he came upstairs. He's working from home, so he uses my dining room as his office. So I came and grabbed another cup of coffee, and I just sat down and chatted with him. And I just said, you know what? I'm not in a good place this morning. And so he started asking me questions, and I started talking. And suddenly, as I was verbalizing things, suddenly I started feeling better because I realized that there was no reason I shouldn't be feeling good. Yeah, there's all these unknowns and I wish they were better. But for that time, for that day, I really had no reason to be feeling the way I did.
You know, I have, in my experience, my number of years on earth, I have come up with this saying: feelings and thoughts are a bit like a volcano.
Yeah.
And you're right. I think for females, we do need to talk about stuff. The women are from Mars, men are from Venus, or flip it, whatever way that is. I think that's just natural. But I found that too with Anthony and other men. If you keep it in and it's just kind of going around, and it's like a volcano and it's stewing and stewing. And if you don't let it out, you don't relieve the pressure, right?
Yeah.
And I've had different men, same thing, just talk to me. And then you could see at the end, they do the good old, right? That, okay, it's out.
Yeah.
It's out. It's the pressure's gone. And unfortunately, I think sometimes we wait till we are ready to explode, even in relationships, right? And if we're smart, we just talk about it while the pressure's a little bit lower. That's kind of what I found a little bit too. And you're right. I don't think men have not been allowed to, and don't take advantage of the power of chatting.
Exactly.
In my opinion. And
yeah,
again, there's a lot of people that agree.
Yeah. And it really gets me to that next point of human connection again. And it's tough to talk about human connection when you're not supposed to get within 10 feet of someone, or you're supposed to stay at home or self-isolate. But there are still ways of making human connection.
Zoom.
Yeah, exactly. Zoom, and we get our kids on Zoom on a regular basis. I've seen my wife's family gets together on Zoom. People are doing, and they're finding innovative ways of doing it. I've had phone calls from family that they would never call me, and I'm not saying that in a bitter or bad way. It's just not part of what we do, right?
Yeah.
In fact, I found it interesting. I did a few weeks ago. I posted on Facebook that I have now hung out with myself for 4 weeks and realized I wouldn't make a very good friend, right? And I posted it facetiously and jokingly, but I think there was actually friends I have on Facebook that took that rather serious, and they started reaching out, right?
Oh.
And so people are ready to connect. We just have to make that effort.
And I don't know if I think you just mentioned this, but I have found, exactly what you just said. Even family members where we would go a stretch of time without chatting and it would all be good. Now everybody wants to talk. It's weird. It's great. Don't get me wrong, but everybody, is it because we're all feeling insecure and in danger that we want to connect? I don't know.
You know, Tracy, and this is going way off script here.
I do that a lot.
I read at the outset of this pandemic, I read an article. No, I lied. I didn't read the article. I read the title.
Okay.
And it had to do with environmental issues, and I don't even want to go there. But what it said is possibly through what we're doing now, Mother Earth will have a chance to sit back and breathe.
Okay.
And I think in a much smaller way, but even more important way, is that as human beings, we've been forced to sit back and take a breath.
Yes.
And I think because like our lives are crazy, Tracy, compared to what the lives of my parents or my grandparents was. Our lives are just going at 90 miles an hour constantly. And suddenly we're sitting back. We're spending more time with the people inside our house. We're spending more time making food. We're spending more time sitting on the deck. We're doing all these things which we were meant to do, which our mental health needs to make those connections and to slow down and actually start enjoying life. So I'm hoping when things get back to normal, normal isn't going to be normal. It's going to be a new normal, where we're going to carry on with relationship building and connecting with other people. Because, and I'm not sure I've told you this quote before, but I read some time ago that we are the loneliest society in history.
Yeah.
Which is kind of bizarre because we have all these different ways of connecting, whether it's Zoom or Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn, and the list goes on and on and on, but we're not really connecting.
Yeah.
And so we need to step back and start connecting. So we're not the loneliest society in history.
I agree.
And you wonder, see, now you got me going.
Love it. Keep going.
So we have this idea that if I'm going at 60 miles an hour, I'm doing okay. Yeah, my mental health is suffering a little bit, but I'm going to make it. I'm going to make it till COVID hits, and then suddenly my mental health says, whoa, hang on. Well, we need to slow down. We need to breathe. We need to be kind to ourselves. We need to build on relationships and have those in the future, because guess what? It makes us smile. It makes us happier. It makes us call people. It makes us communicate the way we should.
It's funny you're saying that, Gerry. I didn't want to dig too deep into the personal experience. It's kind of cliche, but in April alone, my work schedule, I was supposed to be in North Carolina and South Carolina for a week. Then I was going to be in San Diego the following week for another conference. And the third week, right after that, 3 weeks in a row, I was going to be in Saskatchewan recording, I think, about 5 interviews on the road for the show. Yep. And I stopped, and it's a little bit different. You have a moment to breathe and question and think, and not that I didn't do any of those before, but you're right. This has been a different period.
Right, exactly. And so when we step out of this world we're in right now, I hope we don't forget about some of those important things that have happened. Yes, I want to get rid of some of my anxieties. And yes, I want to go out and golf, and I want to go meet with people face to face, because quite frankly, I don't like my work when I can't meet face to face. Even Zoom doesn't do it for me. And I mean, that's another whole story. But so hopefully we don't forget about these important things that actually kind of made us feel good.
I hope not. Even though I said, when this is done, I love driving and I'm always on the go. I said, Anthony, when this is done, I'm driving to Alberta and then to Texas. I was joking, but so to speak, I love driving and I want to hit the road. But you're right. I think there are some lessons in this terribly tough period and changes that we can make, right? Connection. That's a big one.
Absolutely. And if everything else fails, Tracy, reach out for help. And again, sometimes it doesn't take a lot for people to, respond to you, because again, even when I got some of these phone calls from family members they would use the excuse they were checking up on the elderly, which they had been told to do, right? And I go, well, okay, if that means they're going to call me, I'll be elderly. So, but to be able to reach out and talk to other people, again, and we've talked about this, but I can't emphasize enough, being able to verbalize what we're going through, whether you do it to someone in your house, whether you pick up the phone and call someone. There's professionals out there. I was so pleased to see Manitoba, the provincial government jump pretty quick on the mental health thing, and realizing that people's mental health would take a real blow through all of this. Yeah. And so the resources are out there, and we just need to utilize them.
Excellent. I love those points. Connection, reach out. That's a great way to wrap up. So if you can top those amazing words of wisdom, you are absolutely free to do that right now, but I don't know that. Can you, Gerry?
I can't.
No. I think that's a great point to end on. I want to ask you a quick question, though. Yeah. We are going to include your article, A Tale of Two Brains, on our website. So stay tuned out there. We're going to put that in the show notes so that you can reference that. It is an amazing read, and it's a quick read. So just go through that. And I think in addition to this podcast and video episode, my hope is that you are not feeling as alone out there, blaming yourself. I hope this brings you a little bit of comfort, at least opens the conversation. So 2 quick questions before we part, Gerry. I am wanting to get to know our guests a little bit better. And one of the things I absolutely love doing and asking people is their favorite books. Do you have a book that has changed your life that you'd like to share with our audience?
Actually, I referred to it before, Tracy.
Okay.
And yes. Does that work?
Yep, I see it. David D. Burns, Feeling Good.
Feeling Good. And the reason I appreciate that book is because it's written so most anybody can understand it. Very often when it comes to self-help books, I read one chapter, I read 5 pages, and I kind of zone out. Whereas this one it was almost like a page turner for me. And perhaps it was because it described me or it helped me so much in feeling good, as the title says, and described a lot of the feelings that I have and how I can deal with those things. So that's why I really appreciated that book.
Okay. I'm going to put that on my list. Who doesn't want to feel good?
Exactly.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. So the final thing I want to leave our audience with is your contact information. If somebody wants to get in touch with you, can they do so? And where?
Yes, absolutely. And just a little bit further to the article you talked about posting on your website. I try and post these blogs once a week. And so we talked about blame. We talked about blaming others. We talked about blaming ourselves. We talked about getting a new equilibrium in our lives. I try and post one weekly, and so they can find those at my website, which is gerryfriesen.ca. There's also contact information there. If people would like to chat further, would like to send me an email, my contact information is there, and I would love to hear from them.
Excellent. That is what you do as a profession too. If people are in a tough spot, they want to talk, they're okay to contact you, right?
Absolutely.
Good. Well, Gerry, I wanted to thank you so much for coming on the show again. I absolutely love having you. You are so vulnerable, real, and brave in the fact that you share your journey, and we air the dirty laundry so that others realize that at the end of the day, we truly are all the same. We just
absolutely
are going through our own experiences at our own levels. And I love that you are always out there and dedicated to helping farmers feel good and succeed. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, Tracy. I always enjoy talking to you.
Thank you. I love talking to you, and I look forward to the next time.
Alrighty.
Thank you so much, Gerry, and thank you for tuning in. I hope you love this episode as much as I did, and I look forward to seeing you guys next week on the next episode. Bye.
You've been listening to Impact Farming. For more great episodes and articles designed to help you manage and grow your farming operation, head on over to farmmarketer.com. Don't forget to sign up while you're there. We will see you on the next episode.